Hey guys, it's Paul from Online Sax Academy. In today's lesson, we're going to be diving into the world of the blues with 5 amazing blues phrases played by 5 different iconic sax players. First up, we got this phrase by Macio Parker, and this is on the recording Sister Sadie, which is from the 1991 album Mo Roots. Here we go. Now what I've got written out here is the lick in the original alto sax key. So if you play tenor sax, there's a free PDF down below with all of these phrases transposed for tenor sax. Let's listen to it one more time. Check out his articulation. So the first thing that we've already got written on here are the G sharp and the A sharp. Those notes in brackets are grace notes. So what happens here is you flick off into that note like that. Now it's going to sound a bit different on the piano because the piano's concert pitch, but just so you can see the note names, we're flicking off that G sharp onto the A, and the way you do it on the sax is you would slur and go ba-da, blow constantly, move those fingers off as quick as you can. Now if we remove the grace notes here, and this one here is effectively like another grace note as well, this G sharp, what we're left with are the notes of the E minor blues scale. Now these 6 notes of E, G, A, B flat, B, D, this is what's giving that phrase this dark bluesy sound to it. We're using the minor blues scale over the E7 chord because essentially this is like a bluesy piece where E7 is like our home chord. So when you're learning this phrase, try learning the skeleton of it first without the grace notes. So for this section here, you could simplify this into just a G quarter note and don't play these 2 notes here. The other thing is he ends with a really short G here. That's really staccato, and that gives the phrase lots of punch. Have a listen to that second half. Yeah, those last 2 Gs, boo-da. Now when you're learning example blues phrases like this, a really key element is the rhythm. So for example, you could take just this first little phrase here and practice that rhythm but with different notes. So for example, instead of, you could play, and it gets you thinking rhythmically, and that tends to bring so much more conviction to what you're playing. Because with blues playing, it's not so much about using lots of fancy harmonic ideas or complicated scales. You can see here he's basically just using the minor blues scale, but it's the way he's using that blues scale, the phrasing and the rhythm, that really brings it to life. Alright, next up we've got a blues phrase by Sonny Rollins, and this is in a blues in C for him on tenor sax. Again, what you can see here are the notes written for his key in, so this is tenor sax key. Alto sax players, on your free PDF you'll have it transposed for you. This is from the iconic recording of Tenor Madness, which features John Coltrane and Sonny Rollins exchanging choruses and phrases. And this is towards the end of the recording. It's about 10 minutes 30 seconds in, and it's almost a seamless handover from John Coltrane playing a phrase and then Sonny Rollins immediately picks it up and carries it on. See if you can spot where John Coltrane finishes and Sonny Rollins starts. Okay, so now let's just zoom in and listen to just that phrase. Now this is just such a clear bluesy phrase. We'll go into the notes in a second, but again, if you check out the articulation, we've got something here called half tonguing, doodle tonguing, muted tonguing. It's got lots of different names. I have a lesson all about it in the Sax Players Toolkit course over at Online Sax Academy. And you can see that A there, it's got a little cross sign on it. What's happening is this A with the little cross symbol here is barely audible. And this creates a really interesting effect as the 2 C's either side are nice and loud, and we've got this half played A in between. And it makes the phrasing way more interesting. Check it out one more time. Just there, ba and da, we get this da and da kind of sound. The way you do this very quickly is you lightly put your tongue on the reeds, but so that the reed can still vibrate, or you half cover the reed by moving your tongue over. As I said, I go into lots more detail, and there's lots of exercises you can try on the lesson on this over at Online Sax Academy. We've also got this fall here where we're going from C down to E flat, and that's a really common trick with blues playing, especially from that root down to the E flat, which, because we're in a blues in C, E flat is the flattened third. All of these notes here now come from what's known as the major blues scale. So in the Macio Parker lick, that was the minor blues scale. With the Sonny Rollins lick here, this is with the major blues scale. And these notes, because the root note is C, we call this the C major blues scale, and we've got these notes here. And whenever I'm looking at phrases, I always like to look at the last notes or the held notes. And you can see here he's holding a C, which in the overall key of C is obviously the root note. And then down here he's ending on the E, which is known as the third of the chord. So the root and the third, really strong chord tones that really spell out the key that we're in. And just like Macio Parker, he's ending his phrase on the offbeat. This time, this is beat 1, this is beat 2, and he's on the and of 2. And ending your phrases on offbeats like that is another great way to bring a lot of energy and punch to your phrases. Another thing about this phrase is, and this is quite common when you're playing phrases with the major blues scale, often that D, the second, doesn't get used. You can see in that first opening phrase we're skipping over the D and just going straight to the E flat. And that E flat's releasing up to the E natural. And then we're just coming straight from that E natural down to the C. And that's often because if we come down and go, it sounds slightly odd, where this sounds a bit more natural. So you could take those group of notes of A, C, E flat, E, and maybe the G down below as well, and make up phrases just with that. Things like, or something like this. All of those phrases don't include the note D, and that tends to make it a bit easier melodically to come up with phrases. They're also ending on the home note C as well, and that's something else you can experiment with. Alright, next up we've got Branford Marsalis, and he's playing on the tune Doxy, which was written by the previous sax player Sonny Rollins. Now, although Doxy isn't a 12-bar blues, it draws from that bluesy harmony, and everything he plays here could be played on a blues in B flat. Again, this is written in the tenor sax key because Branford's playing tenor sax here. So alto sax players, you've got your transposed version. Now this is an unusual key to play Doxy. Usually you'll find Doxy is played in concert B flat major, whereas here it's played in concert A flat major, so it's a tone lower than usual. Now, along with all these phrases transposed into alto and tenor sax key, I've also put together 12 PDFs where all of these phrases have been transposed so they're all in the same key. So let's say you're working on a blues in G, you could look up these phrases in the key of G from that download, and that download is available for all premium members at Online Sax Academy. Alright, so let's check it out. It's such a great laid back feel. He's really behind the beat, particularly on these notes here. Now this is the first phrase that now starts to mix between the major blues scale and the minor blues scale. The first phrase, Macio Parker, was basically purely minor blues scale with a couple of extra grace notes. The second phrase from Sonny Rollins was pure major blues scale. And this one, we've got a bit of both. For the first half of the phrase, he's using notes from the major blues scale. And the B flat major blues scale are these notes here. We've got this really typical run up of going, and he's putting a big bend into this D flat here. Check it out. And then he drops down to this C sharp being the same as D flat. And from this E flat all the way to here, these notes can all be found in the B flat minor blues scale, which are these notes. Now you can see they have a few notes in common. They both have B flat, they both got D flat, and they've both got an F. But now we've got these three notes of the fourth, the flat fifth, and the seventh, the A flat. Now he doesn't actually use this seventh in the phrase. He's mainly using that E flat, E natural, and F, and he's climbing up chromatically. Have a listen. And then to finish off the phrase, we then return to our major blues scale, and you could even think of this as just the major pentatonic scale. Now, another thing you'll probably see is there's an awful lot of chords up the top here, but basically what Branford is thinking here is B flat blues, which is why he's using the B flat major blues scale, the B flat minor blues scale. Now, you could do some really complex theoretical analysis of exactly how that note relates to the note above in the chord, but that's not what he's thinking. He's thinking in the overall key of what we are, and he's kind of just singing through his sax with these nice bluesy phrases. You can basically think of these chords here as almost like passing chords. They're all heading back home to the B flat 7. That's our one chord, and so you can play over the top of that in the overall key, and it's going to actually sound probably better than if you're trying to outline all of these chords here. Check it out one more time. Next up, we've got this amazing phrase by Sonny Stitt on the tune Hymnal Blues. And this is a blues in D for alto sax. Now, this phrase is similar to the Branford Marsalis one in that we're mixing the major blues scale and the minor blues scale. And in this phrase, Sonny Stitt's really making a feature of this note C, which is our flattened 7th. We're in the key of D here for alto sax. And so that C is the flat 7th, and that's a real bluesy tone. Check out the phrase. And you can hear how he's also ending on this note C at the end. So he's starting literally just going up a major arpeggio. We've got that D major arpeggio, and then he hits the bluesy 7th and holds that note for that whole measure into the next measure as well. Now for this section here, he's kind of mostly thinking in the D minor blues scale. So let's write out these scales. Here's the major blues scale, and here is the minor blues scale. Now you can think of this almost like Sonny Stitt is borrowing elements from different scales. So although this first part starts predominantly major, he's borrowing that flattened 7th from the minor blues scale. Now, he's not necessarily thinking in terms of major blues scale, minor blues scale. He may well also be thinking in terms of chord tones or just pure melody, but this is a way you can start to get these sounds into your ears. You've got the lighter, brighter major and the darker, bluesier minor blues scale, but you can also start to borrow notes from each to see how it sounds. Now, that can make the phrasing a bit more tricky, which is why checking out example phrases to see how you can borrow notes is so effective. Now in this second part here, you can see how it's basically the minor blues scale, but we've got this borrowed E note here. Everything else is from the D minor blues scale. And then to finish off this phrase, all of this is from our major blues scale, apart from the very last note where he's ending back on that flattened 7th. And within the phrase, there's a few interesting twists and turns. We start on the F sharp, the major 3rd, and then we jump straight from this B down to the F, E, D, the flat 3rd 2-1, and that 6th flat 3-2-1 is such a common piece of blues language. You could literally just take that little piece out and play around with that and make up some really nice phrases just with the notes B, F, E and D. And then at the end we've got this nice jump from the F sharp, the 3rd, down to the 5th, and we walk up and end on that flat 7. Again, literally just that measure could be a really nice thing to take, learn in a few different keys and start to use that when you're improvising. I'd really recommend taking out smaller parts like this from within the phrase when you're practicing and using it. It's much more manageable when you're improvising, and it's much easier to work it into your own language as opposed to just playing this whole phrase by rote. Of course, it's great to check out these longer phrases to see how they fit together and to give you ideas. But in terms of building your own language, it's often better to take smaller chunks like one measure or even half a measure. All right, let's have a listen to that phrase one more time. Okay, and to finish off today, we've got this amazing phrase by Lou Donaldson. Check it out. Now, when you first look at the chords here, you may think to yourself, I've got like a 2-5-1, and you have. You've got A minor, D7, G7. These are part of the last 4 measures of a 12-bar blues in the key of G. And much like with the Branford phrase, where there you're in the overall key of B flat on tenor, here we're in the overall key of a blues in G on alto sax. And so instead of looking at these notes and thinking to yourself, well, how does that note B flat, for example, relate to my A minor chord? Is it like a flat 9 on an A minor chord, which sounds almost just wrong on its own? Like the chord analysis can't really work out what that is. Instead, if you know your G major and your G minor blues scales, you can then look at this phrase and make so much more sense of it. So what I've written out here, we've got the major blues scale at the top and the minor blues scale at the bottom. Now, if we go back to this phrase, we can put it into 3 chunks. Basically, from here to here, we're in the major blues scale. We've got this phrase here. Then from this F into the next measure, all those notes are from our minor blues scale. And to finish off the phrase, we're back into the major blues scale. And this is similar to the Branford phrase where he started in the major blues scale, went to the minor blues scale in the middle, ended major. We've got the same kind of sounds being used here, starting major, minor in the middle, ending major at the end. Check out the phrase one more time. There are some other similarities as well, just like in the Branford phrase where he went up and then started emphasizing the flat third. We've got the same thing here with these repeated B flats. These are all the flat third. Now when I say flat third, I mean flat third related to the overall key of G. We've got this flat third sound on the top. We're not thinking of that B flat and how it relates to the A minor chord. We're kind of disregarding those chords and thinking in the overall key of G. There's some other more subtle things going on here as well melodically. This second measure is quite busy and there's lots of different notes. We're falling quite a distance. And then the next measure complements that where we've got this really stable repeated notes of the D, which is the 5th of the chord, and it helps to kind of settle the phrase down and resolve it. And taking those broad brushstroke approaches when you're improvising your phrases of, say, playing something fairly busy with lots of different notes falling and then ending on some simple repeated notes at the end to stabilize the phrase. And you can take these different approaches when you're looking at any of these phrases, from the very broad brushstrokes of the general ideas right down to the more detailed view of what specific rhythms are being used or specific kinds of scales. And you can use different levels of analysis to give you different kinds of inspiration for your own improvisations. All right, so don't forget you can get the free PDF of all of these phrases for alto and tenor sax. And premium members can also download all of these phrases transposed into all 12 keys as well. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon.